For this meeting, the Lunenburg School Committee is convening by telephone conference, video conference via Zoom app as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. For Zoom meetings, please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating via video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the meeting business ground rules. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda, but before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate minutes. The chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. And please remember to speak clearly in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any responses, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in colloquy with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. During public comment, the chair will first ask members of the public who wish to speak to identify their names and addresses, and then call on each by name and afford up to 3 minutes for any comments. And finally, each vote taken in this meeting tonight will be conducted via roll call vote. So moving on to our first item on the agenda tonight, we have our chair's report, which there is no formal chair's report tonight. So we will move on to public comment regarding agenda items. So if there is any public comment specific to any items on our agenda tonight, I'm scrolling down the line here, looking, I'm not seeing any hands raised, and I'm not seeing most cameras are off, so I'm not seeing any hands that way either. All right, then we will move on to line item transfers. We do have a line item transfer tonight. I think you are muted.
I'll invite Mr. Cassidy to go over the line item transfer.
Everyone, Mike Cassidy, business manager. In front of the school committee tonight is a transfer of funds within our special ed programs. Essentially the funds, and I'm not going to go line by line because there are multiple accounts, but we are transferring funds from one special ed account to another. This transfer will essentially balance out our salary and wages accounts for paraprofessionals and teachers. The transfer that's within the shared document just mentions paraprofessionals, but it does reconcile the special education teacher accounts as well. So why are we doing this? There's been so much transfer among paraprofessionals since the start of the school year till now. I think things are kind of settling down. I think we've done the last of our hiring through some of our recent retirements and resignations. And some of our paras have bounced, and teachers, by the way, have bounced from building to building. So those transfers have created account surpluses and deficits, and we're just moving the money around just to kind of balance that out. This is typically done earlier in the year. But as I said, I believe we're done with our paraprofessional hires and transfers. And I suspect there'll be another transfer like this coming up in about a month or so, once the salary schedules hit for the recently negotiated contract The teacher, remember, they got a mid-year bump. The 81 teachers got a mid-year bump. I want to have those salary and wages hitting the account so I can really predict the transfer of funds. So I digress a bit, but what you have in front of you today is just special ed paras and teachers, and we're doing these transfers. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'll turn it back to the chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Cassidy. Committee, any questions regarding this transfer? You received a spreadsheet on it as well. If there are, I'm not seeing any questions. So if anyone would like to make a motion to accept this line item transfer. Ms. Kelly.
This is Laura Kelly, and I make a motion to accept the line item transfer that was brought before us.
Is there a second? Ms. Shapiro.
Sophie Shapiro, and I second that motion.
Roll call vote.
Ms. Shapiro,
Yes.
Mrs. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Leighton,
Yes.
Mrs. Archambault,
yes,
and Mrs. Bertrand.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Moving on, reviewing and approving meeting minutes from regular session 12/16 and 1/6.
12/16 was not completed in time for this meeting, so hopefully we'll have that in time for the next meeting. But you do have minutes from January 6th.
Right, yes. And any questions? I know usually any changes folks have, they get those to Dr. Burnham fairly quickly. So if there's not, I will take a motion to approve those minutes. Mr. Leighton.
I'll make a motion to approve the January 6th minutes.
Is there a second? Ms. Archambault?
I would second that.
Ready for roll call?
Yes.
Ms. Shapiro,
Yes.
Mrs. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Leighton,
Yes.
Mrs. Archambault,
Yes,
and Mrs. Bertrand.
Yes. Superintendent's report.
Good evening, everyone. I want to provide you an update relative to the air quality at Turkey Hill Elementary School. An air quality test was conducted January 13th at Turkey Hill. And what we see is that the CO2 limits are well within the acceptable range, which indicates that our HVAC system is working appropriately. So that's good news. Our HVAC system continues to be functioning well. Flu vaccine, the Mass Department of Public Health has dropped the flu vaccine as a requirement for school-age children. There was some information in the news media last week relative to pool testing. The Department of Ed is initiating pool testing. At this point, it's voluntary for districts. This is a method of testing many at one time. We in Lunenburg have been successful through compliance with safety protocols and keeping our schools operating in the hybrid model. We do not feel that pool testing provides significant benefit to us as a district, so we did not opt in at this time. We feel that if pool testing becomes mandatory, we feel that we will be understaffed with our nursing staff. So that's something that we will also have to look at should it become a mandatory initiative. However, at this time, we've also consulted with our school physician, Dr. Lyons, and he agrees that at this time, it does not make sense for the Lunenburg Public Schools to opt in to this kind of a testing program. Comcast service, very excited. As of yesterday afternoon, our new fiber internet connections were brought online at both the Turkey Hill Elementary and the primary school. Intersite connectivity was restored later in the evening, and as of this morning, everything is fully functional. And we'll be monitoring both those sites closely for a few days to see that that continues. the feedback cycle. So as part of our plan this year, we committed to a regular cycle of soliciting feedback from teachers, students, and staff, and parents. As we're transitioning to incorporate live streaming in our hybrid learning model, in lieu of an electronic survey this cycle, principals will be hosting Zoom forums for parents. At these Zoom forums, principals will be able to provide information regarding what to expect with live streaming when that begins. They will also address any questions that parents may have. And parents are also welcome to share any general feedback they may have at that time as well. Information relative to dates, times, and an access link will be coming from each of the principals to the families at their schools. We do plan at this time to return to an electronic survey to solicit some feedback, and we're looking to implement that survey cycle February 10th through the 12th. February is registration month for pre-kindergarten, kindergarten, our extended day summer program, extended day before and after school program, and the early learning center program. And additional details will be either forthcoming from principals or post website and a message sent out from central office. And lastly, regarding the primary school principal position, recently I conducted forums with staff and families to solicit their input as to how to proceed in order to permanently fill the primary school principal position. I heard from teachers that they felt supported under the interim principal, Chad Adams. They appreciate his self-awareness and the relationships he has established with students. Teachers and parents alike feel that Mr. Adams' communication has been consistent, appropriate, and effective. Teachers and parents also appreciate his visibility, accessibility, consistency, and follow-through. Teachers and parents unanimously recommend that no search is necessary. They wish to see Mr. Adams remain permanently as the Lunenburg Primary School principal. I can comment that I have seen Mr. Adams demonstrate leadership capacity during my tenure here in Lunenburg. I've been very impressed with his capacity for self-reflection and professional growth. So it's with great pleasure that I announce that Mr. Chad Adams is now appointed as the permanent principal of the Lunenburg Primary School. So many of the staff are on this meeting tonight. So many of the staff from the primary school, I think maybe they're all on tonight. So I'm sure that they join me in congratulating Mr. Adams on this appointment.
Excellent.
And that's all I have for you this evening.
Thank you. Congratulations to Mr. Adams. And student representative report. I'm scrolling across to check. I don't think we have a student rep tonight, but I just want to make sure. And I wasn't sure if it was Nicole or Dylan, so doing a quick check. I do not see Nicole or Dylan, so we will move on to new business. We have a donation. And I'm not sure if Dr. Burnham is still with us.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay.
I was going to say I could go over the donation, but you are better suited to do that.
So we actually have two donations this evening, both to Turkey Hill Elementary School. One in the amount of $39.40, and this is from the Box Tops for Education. This money will be deposited into the Turkey Hill gift account. And in the amount of $100 from the Lunenburg PTO, again, these funds will be deposited into the Turkey Hill gift account. And these funds are earmarked for teacher appreciation events. So we thank the PTO very much for their support.
Committee members, any questions? If not, I'll take a motion to accept these donations. Ms. Shapiro
This is Sophie Shapiro, and I'll make a motion to accept both of these donations.
and Ms. Archambeau.
This is Carol Ashambo, and I will second that.
Ready for roll call?
Yes.
Ms. Shapiro,
Yes.
Mrs. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Leighton,
Yes.
Mrs. Archambeau,
Yes.
and Mrs. Bertrand.
Yes. Thanks to the PTO, particularly, and for parents who and community members who continue to ensure that box tops are sent in and or through the app that's available as well. Next on our agenda is our discussion of the FY22 budget.
So I'll ask Mr. Cassidy to join me. Mr. Cassidy, do you prefer to screen share or do you want me to screen share?
I can do that.
Okay.
Hold on. Can you see that?
Yes.
Are you seeing that, Dr. Burnham?
I see the whole a series of slides on the left-hand side, so it's not in slideshow mode. We can go through this way. This will be fine. All right, so this
Hold
evening,
on, just give me 1 second. Let me see if I can. I may hold on. I want to do this professional. Unless you want to try to get it on. This might be the first time I've tried this, so hold on. Yeah, I can't do it. Sorry, Dr. Burnham.
that's perfectly fine. The featured slide is large enough to represent.
Do you want to try to pop it on?
Can you see the full slide? Okay. All right, so this evening, we are going to present to you a proposed budget for fiscal year 22, next school year. As always, we start with our mission statement. And the mission of the Lunenburg Public Schools is to provide all students with the skills, confidence, and passion for lifelong learning so they may find their own paths to successful careers, active citizenship, and rewarding lives. And our vision, the Lunenburg Public Schools is committed to becoming a leader in education by focusing on its values of attending to the personal well-being of its students, providing high quality curricula and student-centered instruction for deeper learning at all levels, and promoting the development of attributes and skills necessary for continuous learning for all. And I would just, again, remind everybody that we are continuing to work on the strategy for continuous improvement. Under that strategy, there are 4 overarching objectives. One is to ensure teaching and learning are student-centered and inclusive by establishing effective teams of educational leaders to accomplish the essential work for transforming practice, and hiring and developing excellent educators who are continually learning and adapting practice to meet the needs of students. The next objective, to create a culture that values data use and fosters continuous learning in a climate that is safe, caring, inclusive, and reflective of our core values. To improve operational efficiencies, including communication, in order to increase the organization's capacity to execute the district's mission and vision. And lastly, to ensure all students are provided equal access to a high quality education that is collaborative, interactive, and relevant, with an appropriate level of support and challenge so that they can become well-rounded, resilient, confident, and capable young adults adequately prepared for future challenges. So a little bit of context and some data trends that we would want to share with you to help frame the proposal that we will make later in this presentation. So again, I would like to remind everybody that much of what we do is mandated by the Department of Education. Many mandates, and many of the items on this list are not directly connected to the teaching and learning and support of students in the classroom. Much of it is more administrative in nature. We would present to you again our projected enrollment numbers that we anticipate that we will see for next year and the year beyond. But as I have said many times, there are no tools that provide us a projection for enrollment that we feel highly confident with. But we do anticipate that we will see a restoration of our student enrollment numbers post-COVID, and those numbers we expect will increase. Obviously this year in a hybrid model, our class sizes are a bit different. We have some students that are fully remote, and then we have other students who attend in a half cohort on campus. However, the goal would be to continue to target and maintain class sizes similar to the 1920 school year. A little bit of academic data. Typically, as part of this presentation, I include some of the data on achievement and growth from the MCAS spring administration. As you know, we did not have an MCAS test last spring, so we don't have that available data. However, we do have other data. We have been conducting local assessments through a variety of tools, including IXL, Lexia, iReady, etc. We did administer fall benchmarks, and currently we are concluding the winter benchmark. And what we would like to do is analyze that data and present a report to the committee in February. A little bit of data here for special education. You can see the numbers of evaluations that were completed in school year 1920 at each of the different schools. You can see that the numbers of evaluations, these are the assessments we conduct to determine eligibility for a student. for special services. You can see that the numbers are high at the primary elementary. The combination of the primary and elementary school is a good bit higher as compared to the combination of the middle high school. It's worth mentioning that the numbers for 2021 are not yet complete. Those numbers are to date, and I can tell you that there are currently 21 pending 3-year reevals at this time. And lastly, just to summarize the number of students that we have on an IEP, broken down by school, we have a total of 254 students, and you can see 100 of those are at the primary school. Well, that's unfortunate. I'm not able to advance my screen. Here we go. Some data points for Section 504. Under Section 504, students needing accommodation that is not typically provided in a general ed classroom as a regular rule. Plan would be developed to include specific accommodations that could be provided to the benefit of the student. So currently we have 145 504 plans in the district. You can see that the primary school, the number is very low, but on the flip side of that, the number of IEPs at the primary school is rather high. A little bit of behavioral health data. This data was presented to you by Jamie Millett in December. And again, we just want to remind folks that with the screenings that were done last winter, pre-COVID, approximately 1/3 of the students who were screened required follow-up with the staff. This October, we started a universal referral process. So that's a process that's consistent across the district to refer students to the behavioral health support team. So if a staff member has a concern for the mental health, and that can be behavioral in nature as well, they can engage in this referral process, and the student will be taken up under the behavioral health support team. And again, these numbers of referrals are the numbers as of December 8th, when this this data was presented as part of a larger presentation. And lastly, for trends and context, we can see that for the most part, the funding provided through Chapter 70 has been fairly consistent. It usually is approximately 37% of our budget. So next, we'll talk about budget development. So as we did last year, we entered into this budget cycle with the priority to develop a budget that meets student needs and aligns with the strategy for continuous improvement objectives, which are transforming teaching and learning, cultivating climate and culture, communication and operations, equity, access, opportunity, and achievement for all students. And our budget process, again, very similar to last year. We began in August and September as a district leadership team, reviewing the strategy for continuous improvement with a COVID needs lens. And we aligned school improvement plan goals, my own educator evaluation goals, our administrators and teachers' goals in their educator plan. All of those goals were aligned with the objectives of the strategy. In October, as is typical, our department leaders and building administrators developed their budget requests with a focus on highest impact for teaching and learning and alignment with the strategy. In November, those budget requests were submitted and reviewed, and the leadership team began to review and revise the 5-year staffing plan. That plan was finalized in December, and it was submitted to the town manager to be incorporated into the 5-year financial forecast, which she presented last evening to the Board of Selectmen and will present tomorrow evening to the Finance Committee. Mr. Cassie and I attended last evening's meeting, and we will also be in attendance at the Finance Committee meeting tomorrow. And we, in December, presented the revised 5-year staffing plan and indicated at that time that those year 1 positions were the highest priority need identified. In January, the leadership team took those year 1 positions and further scrutinized and prioritized those positions to identify those deemed most critical to be included in the FY22 budget. And from that process, we developed 3 budget scenarios. I would just post this again for everybody to review, that these were the positions that were included in the revised 5-year staffing plan for FY22 through 26. And if anybody wants to see the entire plan, it is posted on our website under the school committee link as part of the documents posted for the December 16th meeting. So our budget scenarios. The first scenario, we would add 5 new positions: a social worker, 2 assistant principals, a kindergarten teacher, and a paraprofessional for the kindergarten, the additional kindergarten classroom, should there need to be one created. That would be a roughly 4% budget increase. Scenario 2, essentially we're adding 3 new positions, but it's a little bit of addition by subtraction. So we're still talking about those 5 positions. However, we would be reducing 2 guidance counselor positions. One of those is actually a retirement at the high school. That budget scenario would be a 3.23% increase. And lastly, should we have to hit that target budget of 2.5% as provided by the town manager, we really can only manage to, at this time, project that we would keep the kindergarten teacher and paraprofessional positions in play, and we would have to look elsewhere in the budget for supplies and materials, service accounts, etc., to close that gap, which is $153,000. So the proposed budget. We are actually proposing that we looks closely at the scenario 2 budget, which is a 3.23% increase. The budget that you'll see this evening includes contractual increases. So all the step increases, longevity, degree advancements, anything that is contractually obligated. We were advised to use a 3% figure for planning for health insurance and new employees and current enrollment in our health insurance are factored in as well. It also includes general education transportation increases and any proposed new positions. So those new positions, the assistant principal pre-K to 5. You may remember that last year we advocated strongly that this was a position that we felt was a priority need. And when COVID hit and we had to reconfigure the entire budget with only a 1.58% increase, basically we were asked to level service. We could not include that assistant principal position. So it's back again this year. Again, the teacher and the paraprofessional for the kindergarten. As you know, February is the month for registration for kindergarten. Later in February, after the registration period, at least then I will have a baseline for what we think our enrollment in kindergarten might look like. If that number in February is very high, we may in fact need to be discussing the addition of another kindergarten classroom. But again, this is all pending the data that we see during the registration period. But we feel that at this point, we need to carry these positions in a budget recommendation. The other staff positions, an assistant principal 612, this would be offset by the guidance staff position and no longer having the dean positions. This year there's a dean at the high school and there's a dean at the middle school level, both supporting the principal. If there is a dedicated assistant principal to each of the schools, the dean positions we feel are not needed at this time. And lastly, the social worker position. As you know, we funded the social worker with COVID grant monies this year. And this is a difficult decision and a difficult recommendation here. But we feel that the level of clinical support and expertise that a social worker could provide would be more impactful, more beneficial to our students and our families, because the social worker can work with families to provide those wraparound services that are very important. We want to get our families in a good position so that our youngest students have a good, stable situation at home and therefore set off on the right path for their academic career. So that leaves from that year 1 of the 5-year staffing plan, that leaves the grade 3 teacher and the paraprofessional as a reading tutor off this budget. These are not funded in this recommended budget. Based on numbers, we feel that that large kindergarten class this year is in the 2nd grade. There are 6 2nd grade classrooms. We created the 6th last year by moving the 6th 1st grade teacher to 2nd grade this year. We do feel that we can collapse back to 5 classes, maintain the 5 in the 1st grade, collapse and return to 5 in the 2nd grade, and move one of our teachers to Turkey Hill with that large class as they move to third grade. As always, we try to keep doors open to seek funding for any of the positions that we've identified as need. So if there are available grant funds that can be utilized, we would absolutely look at the reading tutor. These also are not funded in the budget. The psychologist position, based on the number of evals and the total number of evals between the primary school and Turkey Hill combined, the caseload is much more significant than the combined caseload of the middle and high school. Having that part-time school psychologist this year has been very beneficial. We had to ensure that all of the students that were up for reeval late last spring, when we could not conduct evaluations, those students needed to be evaluated right away. So we entered the beginning of this year with a backlog of testing to do. Again, the addition of a part-time school psychologist to help with the increased load at the Turkey Hill primary level is extraordinarily beneficial, helps us with compliance, and we would be looking to fund this out of federal grants. Other positions here, the athletic trainer, the equipment manager, IT technicians, technology trainers. Again, most of these will defer for now. The equipment manager, though, there's a possibility that it may be able to be funded out of the athletic revolving account. And then the unfunded leadership positions, the director of teaching and learning, an instructional math specialist, a director of extended learning programs, and director of instructional technology and communication. And let me just be clear about that last position. This would be a morphing of sorts. Currently, our IT director is shared with the town. At some point, to be able to move that position from a part-time position to a full-time position and expand the roles and responsibilities there, that's what we see as a need that would be beneficial to the district. But we will delay that for another year. The director of extended learning programs, we think that we can fund that from the various revolving accounts attached to the programs that this director would oversee. And lastly, the director of teaching and learning and the instructional math specialist, we see those positions as very important to continued progress. And I think that, we'll be able to demonstrate that we are seeing some good progress for students when we provide that assessment data report for you next month. So we definitely want to look at other funding sources for these positions. Potentially, if we don't need the kindergarten teacher and para, those funds could be reallocated to support particularly the director of teaching and learning position as the top priority. So a little bit about those positions and why we think that they're so important. All of the positions that we're looking at continue to further the work outlined in the strategy for continuous improvement. The social worker will be part of the team that continues to assess the behavioral health needs of the district, participate in leading professional development for staff in areas of mental health, Provide training for staff on social emotional behavioral supports that can be used in the classroom effectively to meet needs of students. Continue to develop and support multi-tiered supports, whether that be social emotional or behavioral supports. The key here is the data collection, archiving, and analysis of the data. That's a piece that for us has been missing, but it's a very much so needed component of this work. This person would also be a key member of the Equity Advisory Council and the Behavioral Health Advisory Council. This position would not only provide some leadership, but also clinical oversight of building-based behavioral health support teams. They would also be able to provide clinical consult for the building-based student support team meetings that are held. Those are more academically based. Additionally, they foster meaningful connections with the students, family, and staff, support the transition to a restorative justice discipline model, facilitate and support that group that we initiated a year ago, the kinship caregivers. That was a support group for extended families who are raising our students. They would also contribute to continued evaluation of the school climate, pilot tools to help improve efficiencies in communication, and obviously they would also be an important component in terms of our emergency operation protocols. So a social worker is able to support the staff through consultation, best practice in Tier 1 intervention, in all settings, not just the general ed classroom. Again, another person providing additional support for kids during dismissal and arrival times. As you know, those sorts of transition times can be challenging for some kiddos. Change for some is a challenge. The supports for students would be more focused around Tier 3 counseling, services through IEP, even Tier 2 counseling groups that target any number of things: anxiety, depression, trauma, loss, grief. Supporting the students by being that steady, consistent, familiar, supportive face in that building. And again, we mentioned that we support the students by supporting the families with those wraparound services. And again, the social worker will be a critical member of the team who continues to support consistent implementation of SEL practices throughout the building. The social worker also provides supports for our administrators, organizing, planning, implementing those universal mental health screenings to identify students in need of additional supports, safety assessments. They can conduct safety assessments of students. They can help an administrator manage a mental health crisis situation. They can also work in consultation and coordination with the Department of Youth Services and the Department of Children and Families. Again, the importance of including a reformative justice model as part of our disciplinary practices, and supporting our administrators and school resource officer for students presenting with truancy issues. The assistant principal. Supervision and evaluation will be one of the most critical differences I think that we will see if we can actually have a full-time assistant principal in each school. When the caseload for evaluations of staff is more reasonable, the administrator can actually have more frequent, more in-depth observations, feedback, and dialogue with teachers around their practice and best practice. And they will be able to provide more consistent and in-depth monitoring and review of progress being made on goals and the artifacts submitted as evidence of that progress. Meeting facilitation. Our administrators are spread pretty thin. It's important to try to have an administrator present at 504 meetings, at IEP meetings, at reentry meetings, reentry from suspensions, grade level planning periods. They would participate with teachers during planning blocks, guiding data review in those planning blocks. They're an important member of the behavioral health support team, the student support team, vertical teams. There are many, many, many types of meetings, each significant in number in and of themselves, where having an administrator present and participating would be beneficial overall to moving the strategy forward and to supporting students and improving teaching and learning. They would obviously be present to support the consistent implementation of all building protocols and processes and execution of all of the action plans under the strategy, as well as fostering those meaningful connections with students. Having an additional full-time administrator versus a half-time administrator, we believe strongly will lead to increased and more timely communication, more visibility, more timely completion of investigations, and there are many investigations. We have to investigate claims impacting students. We have to investigate claims impacting staff. And again, just in general, having this added administrator allows for more timely follow through on all things. The assistant principal, again, is going to support the staff because they're going to be part of their planning blocks. They're going to be more visible in the classroom spaces. They will, again, be a consistent, friendly, welcoming face for students at morning arrival and at dismissal, supporting students with their behavior challenges, even assisting just by recognizing that a student proactively needs to take a break rather than escalate to a situation where we have a behavior issue or a crisis that we have to address. The relationship component here is very substantial. I can't understate the importance of consistent, stable faces, that the kids build relationships with these individual staff members. It makes a difference in how they feel and how they engage throughout the day. And again, that supporting the principal in all matters really and truly will result in follow through in a timely manner. So the director of teaching and learning position, again, we get back to this notion of supervision and evaluation. This year, Mrs. Scott did continue to evaluate some of the staff. We imagine that if this position were maintained, that would continue. This position provides vital leadership in curriculum and instruction. somebody to lead a process for piloting and adopting and implementing new curriculum materials. Identifying and communicating, coordinating around the best practices that we want teachers to share. Really, another critical component of this position is the leadership of the Professional Development Committee in identifying and organizing PD for our staff. This position also would be involved in meeting facilitation, but these meetings would be more of a curriculum base, including joining teachers in their planning periods as well. This position is actually very critical in executing the strategy action plans with some momentum. Again, this position is the lead on evaluating the current curriculum, identifying the revisions that are needed, and again, bringing that consistency of programming district-wide. And I think one of the things that you saw this year, actually it's part of the actions and benchmarks under the goals, is the creation of that assessment schedule. So creating that assessment schedule and helping to adhere to that assessment schedule and execute those assessments to get the data that we need. This position also provides a tremendous amount of support for our teachers in the implementation of any new curriculum materials, any assessment changes, any instructional model shifts. And having someone dedicated to the oversight of teaching and learning really does help to keep the district abreast of all of the initiatives coming through the Department of Ed, grant opportunities that come along, curriculum and technology changes and initiatives at the state level. And we have already seen the benefit of having this position acting as a district liaison with vendors. As an example, prior to this year with this position, different schools were using IXL, but each school arranged for their subscription school-based. There's a budgetary benefit to having one person coordinate and work with a vendor to secure a better price for the district in adopting subscriptions. The school psychologist, again, this position, when we can get to a place where the caseload is stabilized and shared amongst a full-time school psychologist and a part-time school psychologist at the primary Turkey Hill level, we envision a time that the school psychologist might be able to provide tier 2 or 3 counseling, provide some support in our TLC classrooms with facilitating some groups. Again, critical for compliance and timeliness, having additional support for administering assessments for those initial evaluations and those 3-year reevaluations. And those are the places where eligibility for special ed services is determined. They will also chair those IEP meetings. And again, a school psychologist continues to support those meaningful connections with kiddos and contributes to the work of the Behavioral Health Advisory Council. So it's a lot. It's a lot to take in. But the scenario 2 budget, that 3.23% increase breaks down like this. You'll note that there is a salary reserve in this budget because we will be negotiating with, I think, almost every single bargaining unit in the district. Just again, for some history and context, the FY20 budget was a 3% increase. The current year, FY21, was a 1.58% increase. And the proposed FY22 at this time is a 3.23% increase. And you know that as numbers become more clear, adjustments are made, and the percentage increase may go down, it may go up. It depends on what we learn. As an example, what's our Chapter 70 funding? What is our actual health insurance increase? So we expect sometime later in February, and you know that we're having one of our regular meetings the very last week in February because of the February school vacation week. So we hope to have more information at that time about some of the unknown numbers at this time. So those unknowns still, the Chapter 70 funding, our circuit breaker funding, again, we will not know that until the end of this fiscal year. Federal and state grants, you know, our entitlement grants, our Title 1, 2, 4, our special ed grants, as well as COVID grants. So we're hearing that there is additional funding that will be coming, and it will be similar to the ESSER grant model, where they determine the allocations for every district based on the Title I funding formula. We can't say that we're going to get the same money that we received in that ESSER grant because we're not sure what the total number of the available funds that are coming. We don't know what that total figure is. So at this point, it's just impossible for us to even guesstimate what and when those funds may become available. And as always with grants, there are parameters for the grant, ways in which the funds can be used and ways in which the funds cannot be used. So we don't have any knowledge of the parameters around any COVID grant that might be coming. And lastly, I already mentioned that we will be negotiating with the teachers, the custodians, the paraprofessionals, and our food service staff. And we also have individual contracts that are up for renewal as well. And I feel that, you know, this is a statement, you know, I believe that it's understood, but I think it's still important to say it. As the town grows and changes in demographics, changes to the services that are required to educate our students, level service is not going to allow the district to, in places, continue to perform at or above the state in terms of student achievement and growth. To gain real momentum in driving the change that's outlined in our strategy, to see the impact for achievement and growth for our students, the town really does need to invest in the operational budget. So this is where, you know, I think that we will end up having some conversation this evening. We will now be taking this presentation to the different faculty and staff in each of the schools. Obviously, this year it won't be in a faculty meeting in an auditorium. It will be via Zoom. But we will start lining up those presentations starting tomorrow. We do know that the target budget right now, we're looking at a 2.5% increase. We think that it makes sense to schedule a Q&A session for the next school committee meeting, which follows this presentation tonight. It allows you and staff and families an opportunity to digest what is presented tonight and come forward with any questions they may have at the next meeting. We think we might be able to provide an update and an adjusted budget by the end of February if the health insurance figures become known, the Chapter 70 through the governor's budget becomes known, etc. So if we can provide a brief presentation on an adjusted budget in late February, we could follow that with a Q&A session at the first meeting in March. We can certainly provide updates at any meeting, more in the form of reporting news, sharing information versus a readjusted budget and a presentation. We will present to the Finance Committee in March, and the Finance Committee, as I understand it, has asked that I come forward and present to them a budget that has been approved by the school committee. Typically, we have our budget hearings that first meeting in April. So, you know, the public can comment on the budget, engage in dialogue, ask questions, have answers, and then the committee typically follows that budget hearing with a vote on the budget. In order for us to bring this before the Finance Committee in a timeline consistent with the timeline they must adhere to, that would mean that we would have to have a budget hearing at our second meeting in March 17th. And I've talked to the town manager about holding our school department presentation to the Finance Committee to the very last meeting that they would have before the meeting where they have to provide their recommendations. And that meeting of the Finance Committee would be March 18th. And then, of course, the town meeting is as early as it can be this year, the first Saturday in May 1st. And that's all I have for you. I know it's a lot. Hopefully I was able to give you some data that provides the context so that you have the same context that we have as we are thinking through what our needs are and trying to prioritize the positions for a budget funded in the local budget. But you know, as I explained to the Board of Selectmen last evening, the town manager develops that 5-year staffing plan to be deliberate in progress towards meeting the staffing goals that they've identified that they need to get to. Our 5-year staffing plan is very fluid. The needs of students change, enrollments can shift, people can retire and open an opportunity for a restructuring or a reconfiguring of positions and roles and responsibilities. So the way we see this 5-year staffing plan is, these are the positions that we identify sitting here now that we believe we need to put in place in order to execute the strategy to meet the needs of the students, move the district forward, improve student outcomes in achievement and growth, in their social, emotional, behavioral health. We left all of those positions in year one, again, as an effort to be transparent. We indicate the priority, even within the unfunded positions, which of those positions, should funds become available through some other source, that we would look to fund. We brought to you a request to fund certain positions with the COVID grant monies that we received for this school year. And those were positions that were in our 5-year staffing plan that was presented a year ago. The only transition that we made, we traded off the assistant principal position at the pre-K 5 level and moved forward the social worker position that was in a later year of that 5-year plan. And that was based on what we anticipated for the social, emotional, behavioral supports and challenges that we anticipated based on COVID, the impact on our kids and our families. So outlining that 5-year staffing plan for us, and even leaving more than 2 or 3 staff positions on a year one of a 5-year plan. Again, those are the most urgent staffing needs we have. And we further prioritize within that larger list. But again, if funds become available, you know the kinds of positions that we will be looking to fund, knowing what we know right now. That can change, our staffing needs can change, how we would use grant money may change. As an example, if the state mandated pool testing, we would have to hire additional nursing staff to execute the testing. We would have to pay for the tests. So as I sit here right now, there's no mandate around pool testing, but that could change. And with the change in mandates from the state, that will ultimately potentially have an impact on how we think about our priorities for the upcoming years. So do you have any questions?
Committee? Mr. Leighton?
Thank you. I had a comment and then a question, I guess, to follow that. So the comment I had was, you had mentioned the social emotional needs and the increase in the social and emotional needs because of COVID. I think that would be important to add into the slideshow, the presentation, where you talk about the growth and the demographics changing and the needs for our students, and that we need the social worker and the psychologist. I think that would be a good part to add so the community knows about that as well. And then my question was involving the IT director, how it's a shared position. I think it would be great to have a director of instructional technology. And I know obviously it doesn't always work out and the money's not always there. But I wonder if it's possible to look into another additional shared position within the town to save on cost sharing. Maybe an assistant IT director that, again, could assist the school and also assist the town, but also save the town and the school some funding.
I actually had a conversation with the town manager today, and the process to create a new position on the town side is a little bit more involved than how that works for us in the school department. So it is going to require some advanced planning, you know, as we move forward, if we make any adjustments to IT staffing with shared staff. But thank you very much for that feedback.
Ms. Archambeau?
Yes, I just had a question about, as I have not been shy about saying how important I think the teaching and learning position is. When you were talking about federal and state grants and that the district is expecting level funding, will level funding be enough to hold that position?
So the level funding that we referenced was specifically related to circuit breaker, I believe.
Oh, it was under the next bullet that said federal and state grants, allocations typically not announced till late July.
For the most part, those grants are the entitlement grants, the Title 1, 2, 4, our special ed grants. Again, you know, we may, we will always anticipate that there'll be a reduction in those funds. However, with a new administration in Washington, I don't know if the funding would be increased through those federal grants. So we may see a change that provides some additional funding, but I think strategically, we always plan anticipating a reduction. And typically when the Department of Ed holds meetings to review Title I, as an example, they typically advise you to plan for a certain percentage reduction
Right.
in the funding. Mr. Cassidy, do you want to add to that at all?
I just want to, hi, this is Mike Cassidy, Business Manager. I just want to reiterate one thing that you said, Dr. Burnham, in your presentation. If funds become available within the budget, you know, whether it was the kindergarten teacher or the para, you know, the funds may shift to support that position. This is one position that has had a lot of success this school year so far. I know it's very important to keep that momentum going. There's a good possibility that the funding that position may come from multiple sources. So it could be from state and federal grants, which may be level funded, and we're not hearing any significant reductions in our entitlements. Probably look at school choice and possibly even the local budget if at the end of the day there are funds there. So like I said, that's the way I look at this position being played out. Does that answer your question, Ms. Archambeau?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
We anticipate by the end of February that we'll have the kindergarten registration numbers as a baseline. And unless we see some baseline that already is significantly high and would have a high class size in the existing 6 kindergarten classrooms, we would need to keep that position in play. However, if that's not what we see through the registration in February, again, I think that what you're going to see from us with an adjusted budget would involve reallocating the funds currently aligned with those 2 positions, the kindergarten teacher and para, to at least partially supporting a salary for the director of teaching and learning. It's one of the highest priorities that we have after we staff those positions that have the direct impact on students, right? The day in, day out of an assistant principal, a social worker, the school psychologist, that is actual day in, day out direct impact on students. There's definitely an impact on students with a director of teaching and learning position. It's just not as obvious and direct day in and day out. But for me, the momentum that we have started this year with that director of teaching and learning position working so well with the Title I coordinator position. It has provided so much forward momentum. I just really do not want to take a step backward and lose that position. So until we know whether or not that kindergarten position, that kindergarten classroom is needed,
Mhm.
we'll keep the kindergarten positions as a priority for right now. But again, we'll know more by the end of February.
Thank you.
Dr. Burnham, I had a question.
Mhm.
A couple actually. So on this sustainability thought process, if there are alternate funds and you know, going back to when you first came to the district, a director of teaching and learning was, you know, something you said from the outset was of the highest priority in terms of making a global impact, you know, on a large scale in the district. If those funds can sort of be cut and paste, how are you looking sustainability year to year? Because in adding a position, and typically you know, a major position like that, that's always the fear, is if you're going on those grants and ad hoc funds, how do you say we will continue
Right.
to be able to fund this?
So my greatest hope, I guess, in answering that question is that what we will see is some enrollment for kindergarten that's a little bit more stable, something similar to what we've seen the last couple of years, and that we can meet the needs of the kindergarten with our current 6 classrooms. And then the greatest priority for those funds earmarked, it goes right over to that director of teaching and learning. So at least a portion of that salary will be in our local budget. So we're seeking funds to fund only a portion of it. How that plays out year to year, again, it comes down to the priority and the impact of the position. And I think, you know, COVID funding allowed us the opportunity to fund a position that we otherwise would not have been able to fund. And it was a much needed position given the colossal shift that we were seeing in the way teachers teach and the way kids are learning and the tools that were going to be necessary for teachers for us to secure those tools and train staff on those tools and provide them the infrastructure that they needed for those tools. Oversight of that, I can't even imagine that we would have been able to coordinate that well, that we would have been able to implement assessments that give us the data that we need. I think, you know, some of the initial data that I'm looking at just makes me really, really happy. So you know, you'll get to see some of that data at an upcoming meeting next month. I think that once you have that position, you know for sure the impact that position has. You can provide a greater justification and rationale for keeping the position over perhaps adding other positions that are identified in our 5-year staffing plan. Again, I think we've been very fortunate, number one, that we had a different funding source that allowed us to be able to put that position in play, and that we had somebody in district that had the capacity to jump into that role and do it very well. And the fact that we were also able to, through grant funding, fund that Title I coordinator position, having those 2 positions new this year, major impact on the way we are thinking about, talking about, looking at teaching and learning. super important. So those two positions really, I think, have demonstrated their value. And in the process of trying to prioritize these positions, the principals had a really hard time. They really want to keep that director of curriculum or teaching and learning lead position. It has made a difference for them in the ways in which their teachers are working and the support that their teachers have in terms of the curriculum development, selection of curriculum materials, implementation of assessments, gathering that data, running those reports and providing them for teachers. That's something that teachers don't have to find time to do. We've got curriculum leaders in the district now who can do that for our teachers and sit down with them and look at the data and talk about what we need to do for individual students in the classroom. That's where you have the real impact on kids through those positions. The recommendation here tonight, it was difficult. You know, we're trying to give weight to these positions. Which one do we think will be most impactful? Which one is the most important for direct impact on kids, services that directly support kids day to day? Those were those positions: the assistant principal, the social worker, the school psych. Those positions have that kind of impact for kids every day. But I tell you, I am not going to let go of that director of teaching and learning position without a fight now that I've had it, and now that it's been demonstrated the impact that that position can have for the district, our momentum in executing the strategy, you know, improving outcomes for kids. So I'm pretty determined that we're gonna
I know you are.
find a way to fund that position one way or another. I personally, I am just delighted constantly when we are in instructional leadership team meetings, as an example. The bar has been raised for sure in terms of the meetings and the dialogue that's happening in those meetings. Those positions have provided a spark that we all knew we needed. But I would say that the last couple of years, that's the way we've been thinking about things. Identifying the student need and trying to figure out which positions would have the greatest impact directly day in and day out for kids. And those were the positions that we prioritized prior. And we're still prioritizing them, right? That AP, the social worker, and the psych, still prioritizing that. But on a global level and the impact for the district, that director of teaching and learning position is, in my mind, it's a must-have if we're going to have some momentum in the district.
So two other questions sort of, and this second question kind of ties into that. There was reduction regarding guidance 6 through 12. Obviously the deans would potentially, those stipends would go away. So you mentioned through retirement, things like that. Are you not rehiring a position like that? Is that, and
Correct.
will that,
Correct.
and that will potentially, that's
Yep.
gonna offset with the assistant principal, correct?
Correct. So the way we're thinking about this is, again, we looked at the positions and the role and responsibility that these different positions would take on, and then tried to prioritize, you know, what might we be able to give up in order to get this without giving up too much. So the social worker can take on some of the functions that have currently been provided by the guidance counselor at the primary school level, and may actually be, we believe, more impactful because of the clinical background, because of the clinical support that can be provided, and because of the wraparound services that they can connect families with. They're going to engage with, you know, DCF. They're going to engage with the families, and try to help them get the supports they need. Creating stability in the family unit and making sure that they have the supports that they need to attain that stability provides a better foundation for our kids to be learners. So it was difficult, but I would say this. Yes, the one at the high school level is a retirement that we would look not to fill. We did put a guidance counselor position in the 5-year staffing plan, I believe in year 2, anticipating that we believe that this is going to be manageable without a negative impact to the operation and the direct support for kids. We're going to monitor this closely. We're going to continue to gather data. I may be back here next year telling you that we need to restore guidance positions because we're still not satisfactorily staffed to meet the needs of the kids. I may be back asking for that next year. Right now, sitting here right now, we believe that the positions we can fund by not funding those 2 positions have a greater overall impact, you know, in our day-to-day operation, in direct support of students. Again, hard decisions.
And I had one final question regarding the salary reserve. Is that sitting in all 3 budget scenarios? So
This time, yes.
would you be looking to, if we were faced with looking at a 2.5, would you be looking to pull from that reserve so as not to cut FTEs?
So when we dig into that, right, and I think again, late February, with actual numbers, that gap may be actually less than what it looks like it is right now. If there's a way to close that gap and get to a 2.5 without sacrificing additional staff positions, I would look to those alternate ways to close that gap and try to keep that salary reserve as it is right now. I know that, you know, there are too many unknowns right now, so I can't sit here right now and guarantee you that no matter what, that figure in the salary reserve will not be touched. I can't say that right now. But it would be my goal and intention to see if we could close the gap in another way.
Thank you. Are there other questions from the committee? Looking, I'm not seeing any. All right, I think that is it for our questions for tonight. Obviously, with every meeting, there will be more information, more questions that may come to light, or from, you know, once we have a Q&A, if we have community members asking questions that may spur thoughts from others in the community or the committee members. So
absolutely. And you know, the slides are posted on the website under the school committee link. with the documents for tonight's meeting. And I would suggest that any member of the community who, reviews that document or watches this presentation this evening, and if they have questions and they're unable to attend the next meeting, or they don't want to wait that long to get their information, they can certainly email direct. We'd be happy to answer questions, and the same is true for all of you. As you process and ponder some of what we all presented here tonight, you may have other questions. And I would really encourage you to reach out with those questions. Happy to answer them, and happy also to provide that same information to all the members of the committee, if it's something that I think would be beneficial to all of you to have that question and answer.
Thank you. Then we will move on to old business, looking at the school reopen plans revised.
So I would invite Mr. Santry to be the spokesperson to sort of summarize the changes that we made to the plans that we brought before you, gosh, late August, early September. We've made some adjustments to address the addition of live streaming. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Santry to hit the highlights for you.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Burnham. Good evening, everyone. Tim Santry, Lunenburg Middle School Principal. Thank you for having me here to discuss our building reopening plans. With the committee's permission, I'm going to briefly report out on the major changes of each of the 4 buildings made to the individual plans, and talk about the process in which they went through in order to make those changes. Does that sound reasonable?
Very.
Okay. So as you remember, as Dr. Burnham touched upon, the reopening plans were first created for each of the buildings in late August, early September, to document the changes in operations of the schools due to COVID-19 and the health and safety protocols, as well as teaching and learning and changes to the classroom environment under the hybrid model. So recently, we have revised these plans to include the language around synchronous learning and with the expectations for students during those live streaming. So all those changes we bring before you tonight have been vetted and developed with building administrators and their building leadership teams, with department heads, and through their LEA representation, and through each of the building's school advisory councils. So the major addition to the district faculty reopening plan is the addition of the guidance from the Department of Education and Secondary Education for the requirements for that synchronous learning. I believe the language was an average of 35 hours of synchronous learning over a 10-day time span. And now that plan, those reopening plans reflect that language. So all stakeholders are on the same page for what our expectations are. The other major additions to the student reopening plans is the expectations for students in terms of attendance and technology and appropriate workspaces and dress, as well as directions on use of their camera and access for quarantine students. So I know all that work was done building based with all stakeholders involved. So I'm confident those changes are developmentally appropriate and that all stakeholders had a say and that it's really what's best for students as we move forward in this new piece of live streaming. So if you choose to approve the changes in the plans, building principals will communicate with parents through their weekly emails. And actually, as Dr. Burnham touched upon earlier, that each principal is going to hold a drop-in Zoom meeting to discuss changes and field any questions parents may have about the reopening plans or about the upcoming live streaming that begins for K through 7 on January 29th. So those are really the two major changes that we made to the reopening plans. They revolve around time and synchronous learning and expectations for students. So I can field any questions the best I can. And like I said, this has been vetted through all stakeholders in each building. So I'm confident that the changes incorporate several different viewpoints. So if there are any questions, I'd be glad to try to answer them. Otherwise, I know my middle school Zoom drop-in will be on Tuesday, 26th. Field any questions around this.
And I believe the high school one was this evening.
Tonight, it was.
And the primary in Turkey Hill, I think, are planned for next week.
Next week is right. Yep. Elementary school next Tuesday, 5:30 to 6:30.
Yes, in the high school, that happened tonight as well. Yep, that's correct.
Primary school is next Thursday, 5:30 to 6:30.
Heidi, you're doing next Tuesday?
We can talk after.
All right.
You too. Oh, you guys. Oh my goodness. Are there any other committee related questions? I mean, that was loved that brief and clear, communication, Mr. Santry, on the basic changes within the language, and I think it's pretty clear why those changes were made. So, and it's great to see that those Zooms are all happening in a 1 week period of time, very close to when live streaming is beginning in each building. So
Thank you, Ms. Bertram.
So yes, if there are no questions from the committee, I will take a motion to approve these revised reopen plans. Ms. Archambault.
Hi, this is Carol Ashambo, and I would like to move that we approve the revised reopening plans as presented this evening.
And is there a second, Mr. Leighton?
It is Brian Leighton. I second that motion.
Roll call vote.
Ms. Shapiro,
Yes.
Mrs. Kelly, Mr. Leighton,
Yes.
Mrs. Archambault,
Yes.
and Mrs. Bertrand.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on our agenda, third read of policies. Regulations governing the use of school facilities, 5204, promotion and retention of students, 5805, student photographs, 6509, and public participation at school committee meetings. So our two policy subcommittee members are each going to read two of these policies. Just one question quickly, Dr. Burnham, was there any feedback, since we had no feedback after the first two waived readings, and these policies have been up on the school committee page on the district website? Has there been any?
None.
Feedback? No feedback. Okay.
So then verified that at 5 p.m. this evening.
Okay. Thank you. So we will let our policy subcommittee members give the third and final reading of these policies. So do you want whoever has 50? You're going to start, Ms. Kelly. Thank you.
Well, is that fine if I start with regulations governing the use of school facilities? Is that okay if we start with that one? Okay, perfect. Community relations, 1000, community use of school facilities, 1200, regulations governing the use of school facilities, 1202. It is the policy of the Lunenburg School Committee to permit responsible organizations where the main purpose is to benefit the citizens of Lunenburg. The use of school buildings and athletic fields to the extent that there is no interference with the educational programs. The complete control of school buildings and equipment is by law vested in the school committee, and the administration of the rules and regulations governing the buildings is delegated to the superintendent of schools of his or her designee. Use of school facilities shall be granted within the limits prescribed in Chapter 71, Section 71 of the Massachusetts General Laws and Acts, an amendment or addition thereto. This policy covers all functions/events which are held in the Lunenburg Public Schools after school hours, Monday through Friday, and anytime on Saturday or Sundays. School facilities are not available to private individuals for personal profit. Non-school organizations utilizing the school are charged custodial costs and fees based upon a schedule approved by the school committee. Priorities for use of school facilities. Use of the school facilities for annual town meeting and for polling is reserved for the town on the first and third Saturdays in May and the first Tuesday in November. During annual town meeting, the school facilities and grounds will not be available for use other than the scheduled academic testing. Priorities for use of school facilities, including buildings, playgrounds, and athletic fields, shall be as follows. Number 1, Lunenburg school activities, extended day, student performances, student athletic events, dances, graduation, school councils, school committee, etc. Number 2, Lunenburg community education activities. Number 3, Lunenburg school support groups, PTO, PACSAL, etc. Number 4, Lunenburg town-related and Lunenburg youth sport organizations. Number 5, Lunenburg youth-related nonprofit organizations, Scouts. Number 6, Lunenburg nonprofit groups. Number 7, community recreational use, non-scheduled Lunenburg resident use of tennis courts, basketball courts, track, fields, or playgrounds. 8, all other. Scheduling, priority. Number 1, Lunenburg public school activities receive priority over other organizations for use of buildings and fields. Number 2, Lunenburg Public Schools administration, faculty and staff are required to complete applications for the use of their own buildings and fields. Cancellations. Number 1, scheduled activities may be preempted by Lunenburg Public School activities only with the permission of the superintendent of schools and provided a notice of no less than 72 hours is given to the permitted organization. Number 2, on days when school has been canceled because of emergency conditions, the school buildings and grounds may not be available. However, all scheduled use will automatically be canceled unless the renter contracts the school being rented to confirm the availability of the school. Conditions of use all facilities. All facilities use requests must be completed online. Contact the Director of Facilities for access to the system. Certificates of insurance, if applicable, must be submitted to the Director of Facilities. Number 1, it is required that all renters obtain and review this policy in its entirety. All renters must sign an acknowledgement form indicating that they have received and reviewed this policy. Number 2, there are certain restrictions upon the use of school property and the building. The user is solely responsible for the fulfillment of the regulations of the following: A, State Department of Public Safety, B, state and local fire laws, C, state and local police laws, D, internal revenue admission laws, and E, state laws relating to rental of school facilities. 3, organizations, any group or entity excluding the Lunenburg Public Schools, using school buildings or grounds under a permit from the superintendent's office are restricted to the use of the rooms and/or spaces assigned to them. Participants found wandering unsupervised in a school building will be immediately escorted out of the facility. The sponsor of the activity will be notified. 4, organizations using school buildings will use only one designated entry and exit. An adult, an individual over the age of 21, must be present during the entire duration of the activity to monitor and control the entering and existing of children participating in the activity. Organizations are required to provide adult supervision at the entrance of the facility during the entire duration of the event to ensure the safety of the participants and the facility. Number 5, specific bathroom facilities will be designated for use and only those bathrooms will be accessible. The organization using the building will be responsible for monitoring these bathrooms. 6, use of tobacco and/or nicotine products, alcohol, marijuana, and any other illicit substances are prohibited on school property. 7, the applicant must be present throughout the time the facilities are being used. The applicant is responsible for the decorum of the group, including spectators. 8, when minors are using a facility, they are required to have supervision on a 1-to-10 ratio basis. At least one adult 21 years or older must be present at all times. 9, food and/or beverages are only permitted in cafeterias or all-purpose rooms. Eating or drinking in auditoriums or gymnasiums is not permitted. Only prepackaged food and beverages for resale are allowed through the concession stand. 10. Any damages sustained to the facility and or equipment during its use will be considered the responsibility of the renting organization. The renting organization will be billed for any repairs needed to restore the facility and or equipment to its original state. 11. No electrical apparatuses shall be connected to any lighting system unless it is first inspected and approved by the district-approved auditorium manager or technical staff personnel. 12. In all cases where gymnasiums are used for athletic purposes, participants are required to wear athletic shoes. 13. Cleats or turf shoes are not permitted on the track. Participants must not put cleats or turf shoes on until participants are on the turf field. 14. School kitchens are available only when proper lunchroom employees are employed at an additional expense to supervise and protect the interests of the Lunenburg Public School. Applicants must contact the Food Services Director to arrange for the specifics and receive an estimate of the costs. 15. Entrance to the property shall be permitted only via the designated entrance for the school in use. All doors to the facility shall remain locked at all times except that custodial personnel shall unlock main entry doors for entrance by authorized groups as scheduled, 15 minutes before and after scheduled start. 16. Access to the facility will be available only as indicated on the approved application form. 17. Equipment of the building users, such as scenery and furniture, may not be moved in or out of the building during school hours. 18. Anyone utilizing the middle school or high school auditorium must employ school personnel appropriately trained to operate the lighting, curtains, drops, scenery, etc. It is the policy of the Lunenburg Public Schools not to loan school materials and equipment to individuals or groups. 19. All vehicles are strictly prohibited from parking in fire lanes. There shall be no double parking. There shall be no parking in handicapped designated spaces without proper RMV issued place cards or license plates. This will be enforced by the Lunenburg Police Department and violators are subject to being ticketed and or towed. 20. There shall be no parking or driving in any school property in conjunction with function unless prior approval is granted by the superintendent. Upon approval, a permit shall be issued and must be displayed while on school grounds. Any vehicles on school property must be operated by licensed drivers. 21. All non-school or town governmental related activities must be completed and the premises vacated by 10 p.m. Personnel. 22. The custodian on duty shall be responsible for the supervision of the building and equipment, safety precautions in the building, cleaning of the building after its use, and for any services required by the renter in accordance with the use of the facilities approved. 23. Custodians have no responsibility to groups other than as described above. 24. Police coverage may be required for a particular activity. The applicant is responsible for making these arrangements and for payment of the same. 25. School facilities are not available for use without a custodian on duty. Advertising. The district is not responsible for advertising of non-school events. Any advertising associated must identify by name the sponsoring group. Insurance coverage. The organization shall procure and maintain insurance against claims for injuries or losses to persons or property that are alleged to have arisen in connection with the activities underlying this application of the organization and any agents, representatives, or employees. Insurance companies must be licensed by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts or otherwise acceptable to the school department. The cost of such insurance, including required endorsements or amendments, shall be the sole responsibility of the organization. Full disclosure is required for any non-standard exclusions. Number 1, a copy of certification of insurance with minimum limits of $3 million for general liability covering bodily injury and property damage combined and personal injury must be attached to the application and forwarded to the Director of Facilities for review prior to the date of the activity and before final approval of use is granted. Number 2, all certificates of insurance must include the town of Lunenburg as additional named insured. Cleanup. 1, neither the school department nor its custodian on duty assumes any responsibility for liability to the property of the renter. Number 2, all decorations, furniture, trash, and other materials shall be removed immediately by the renter and after the completion of the function. All decorations must be fire resistant. Changing equipment, electrical adjustments, driving nails, or hanging decorations shall be done only with the consent of the Director of Facilities. At no time shall objects be attached to stage curtains. Number 3, Lunenburg Public Schools will not be responsible for any material left behind. Such materials will not be saved and the renting organization will be charged for removal. Costs. Number 1, custodial costs are charged to the using organization. Number 2, fees for building use are established by the school committee on a regular basis. The rental charge for the use of school facilities will be a fixed fee plus expenses for the services listed below. All groups will be charged hourly for the custodial, auditorium, control booth, or cafeteria services if warranted. Number 3, costs for trash disposal may be charged to using organization if the event requires dumpster pickup in addition to the regular scheduled pickup period. The building principal and athletic director, in conjunction with the director of facilities, shall have the responsibility for determining the amount of service help necessary for any rental. The final cost for any rental will be determined by multiplying the flat rate per hour by the duration of rental and adding the cost of service work as required. The time of the custodial services charge will necessarily include the time required to the facility for the rental, the time the facility is in use, and finally, the time required to restore the facility for school use following the rental. Community recreational use. Recreational public use of the facilities must be consistent with the uses for it was. The district will have the authority with school committee approval to post signage on campaign prohibited use. Voted Lunenburg School Committee October 20th, 1999. Reviewed Lunenburg School Committee November 7, 2001 and January 11, 2016. Revised and approved July 16, 2007 and April 27, 2016. Updated and approved May 3rd, 2017. Updated and approved October 17, 2018, and updated and approved May 1st, 2019. Made it. Brian, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Brian, I think she needs a break.
Sounds good. So I'm going to be reading 5805. So students and instruction, 5,000. Students, 5,800. Student photographs, 5805. Individual schools may arrange in cooperation with the school's parent organization, student council, designated student committee, or a staff committee to take individual student and or class group pictures. Individual and or class group pictures may be taken at the school facility and during the regular school day hours. The pictures shall be made available for purchase by students and or parents, guardians on a voluntary basis. The building principal or their designee shall have final authority in authorizing the picture taking program and will be responsible for overseeing the process. Students may be required to have an individual picture taken for the cumulative file or identification purposes. However, no student shall be pressured or required to purchase photographs. The purpose of the policy is to enhance the safety of students through visual identification in an emergency situation, facilitate the social, educational, and administrative activities conducted in the school, provide a service to parents, guardians, and students, allow the profits gained from the picture taking program to be used by the sponsoring group and authorized by the building principal. Legal reference MGL 30B 1B 31, source MASC February 2019. I can continue. We can do the 6509. School committee 6,000, school committee meetings 6,500, public participation at school committee meetings 6,509. All regular and special meetings of the school committee shall be open to the public unless the committee votes to enter executive session. The school committee desires individuals to attend its meetings so that they may become better acquainted with the operations and the programs of our local public schools. In addition, the committee would like the opportunity to hear public comment. Public comment is not a discussion, debate, or dialogue between individuals and the school committee. It is an individual's opportunity to express an opinion on issues within the school committee's authority. The Lunenburg School Committee will incorporate at least one period of public comment during each meeting. To ensure the ability of the school committee to conduct the district's business in an orderly manner, the following rules and procedures are adopted. 1. The public comment period is limited in total time as outlined in the school committee operating protocols. By vote of the school committee, the public comment period may be extended under extenuating circumstances. All speakers are encouraged to present their remarks in a respectful manner. 2. Speakers will be limited in their comment time as outlined in the school committee operating protocols. Speakers must begin their comments by stating their name and address. Staff speaking during public comment will state their name, school, and position. The presiding chair may permit extension of this time limit in extenuating circumstances. 3, no person shall address a meeting of a public body without permission of the chair, and all persons shall, at the request of the chair, be silent. No person shall disrupt the proceedings of a meeting of a public body. If, after clear warning from the chair, a person continues to disrupt the proceedings, the chair may order the person to withdraw from the meeting, and if the person does not withdraw, the chair may authorize a constable or other officer to remove the person from the meeting. 4, topics for discussion should be limited to those items within the school committee's scope of authority. The authority of the school committee primarily concerns the review and approval of the budget of the district's public schools, the performance of the superintendent, and the educational goals and policies of the district's public schools. Comments and complaints regarding school personnel, apart from the superintendent, or students are generally prohibited unless these comments and complaints concern matters within the scope of the school committee authority. 5, the chair of the meeting, after a warning, reserves the right to terminate speech which is not constitutionally protected because it constitutes true threats that are likely to provoke a violent reaction and cause a breach of the peace or incitement to imminent lawless conduct or contains obscenities. 6, written comments may be presented to the presiding chair before or after the meeting. All remarks will be addressed through the chair of the meeting. Comments made during the public comment portion of the meeting do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of the Lunenburg School Committee. Legal references MGLC 30A 18 to 25, cross references BE school committee meetings, BEC executive sessions, BEDA notification of school committee meetings. Source MASC, MGL Chapter 39, Section 20G, revised August 2nd, 2006, updated and approved December 19th, 2018.
Thank you.
Students and Instruction 5000, Instructional Program 5200, Promotion and Retention of Students 5204. Graduation requirement. Prior to graduation, each student must meet the competency requirements imposed by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. The following requirements are understood as having to be successfully completed, passing grades in order for the diploma to be granted at Lunenburg High School. English, 4 credits. Social Sciences, 3 credits. U.S. History or U.S. History 1 or World History are required. Science, 3 credits. 2 credits must include lab. Mathematics, 3 credits. Students are required to take math for 4 years. However, they are required to pass Algebra 1 and 2 and geometry. Foreign language, 2 consecutive, foreign language, 2 credits. 2 consecutive years of 1 foreign language are required. Physical education, 1.5 credits. Unified Arts, 2 credits, Health Education, 0.5 credit, Electives, 5 credits, and Civics Project, where the requirement can be met by successful completion of specific social sciences or English courses or electives. Approved September 7th, 1994, revised December 2nd, 2004, updated and approved May 3rd, 2017.
Thank you. All right, we have read all 4 policies. This is our 3rd and final read. So this is where I would accept a motion to approve these revisions in policy. Mr. Leighton.
Yes, this is Brian Leighton. I'll make a motion to approve policy 1202, regulations governing the use of the school facilities, policy 5204, promotion and retention of students, policy 5805, student photographs, and policy 6509, public participation at school committee meetings.
There's a second, Ms. Kelly.
Laura Kelly, and I will second that motion.
Roll call vote.
Ms. Shapiro,
Yes.
Mrs. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Leighton,
Yes.
Mrs. Ashambo,
Yes.
and Mrs. Bertrand.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. We will now move on to public comment. This is open to anything within the scope or purview of the school committee. Mr. Passios.
Oops.
There we go. Camera should be on momentarily. Hi, folks.
It-
Dave Passios, 56 Whiting Street. My comments are going to be as a vice chair of the Parks Commission. I realize that was the third read on those policies, so they've already been voted, so on and so forth, and will be in place. I've been amiss in not following your policy procedures up to this point, but I've got a couple of concerns and or questions. Specifically related to Parks and Recreation programming as it relates to the policy that you just put in place. You had a list of, I believe it was 8 categories, and I don't quite understand where Lunenburg Parks and Recreation sponsored programs fit into that list. If I heard it correctly, it sounds like it's like number 7, right at the bottom of the list. And then the other concern I have, and actually this comes from one of our other members, our chair, is with item number 4, why are nonprofit sponsored youth sports being lumped in with town-related entities? Those are the concerns that I heard when it was read, and I understand it is kind of late, but I don't know if anybody would be willing to comment as to why the prioritization was set up the way it was through the chair, if that's possible.
I don't know. I don't know if any members of the subcommittee or Dr. Burnham want to offer anything on that.
I can comment a little bit on that. So in the policy, potentially that would fit under even category 4, Lunenburg town related organizations. Possibly also under 6, Lunenburg nonprofit groups, but I wouldn't consider it all others. When we discussed number 7, what Mr. Passios is referencing, community recreational use, this was, I think, more considering the non-scheduled use of tennis courts, basketball courts, the track, where they're not actually reserving the space. Where I think what Mr. Passios, I think, is looking at is more of reserving the space, and that would be more of a Lunenburg town-related organization. Actually,
Right. And as we ramp up programming through Parks and Recreation, I'm just concerned that, you know, where we fit into that list of priorities of that were listed there. I agree. And now that you explained number 7 to me a little bit clearer, it does move us up into the 4 or 5 range, which is definitely better than 7. But, you know, as some of you are aware, even the little bit of programming that we've tried to schedule over the past year or so has been very difficult to get a commitment for programming space. So I just bring that to your attention. Thank you.
Thank you. I would also add just to that I think it's more of the school educational purposes is priority 1, and then after that it's again reservations, and then if there's an organization that's, say, reserving that tennis court, they would obviously have the advantage over someone who was just coming to play tennis and didn't reserve the court, for example.
Yep, that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? I thought I saw a hand. I'm looking. I don't see any other hands raised. I thought we had another public comment, but it does not look like it. So we will move on then to reports. Athletic Advisory Committee.
Yes, we plan to meet on Monday, February 1st, before the special spring season where football and cheer would be starting after February vacation.
And Finance Committee.
The Finance Committee met on the 14th of January. There was a discussion regarding the development of a matrix to organize information for the committee and for voters regarding major capital projects. The town manager read a report to plan on a 3% increase in health insurance, as we had talked about earlier, for the FY22 budget. The CARES Act funds will be available through December of 2021. Only unbudgeted COVID-related expenses are eligible, and this was the funds that were running out in December. If you still had remaining funds, those would you could spend through the next December. Also, Mr. Beardmore had expressed concern that an approved school committee budget will not be available prior to FinCom recommendation for the town meeting. We have discussed that this evening. The next meeting will be on the 21st. It's the 5-year forecast and the capital plan. And that was that meeting.
Thank you. Policy Subcommittee,
We have not met.
but we're clearly busy. PTO.
The PTO will be meeting on Monday, February 8th.
School councils, the primary school.
Our January meeting actually did not take place, so we are scheduled to meet on February 8th, I believe. Yes, February 8th.
Excellent. And Turkey Hill.
Turkey Hill is planning to meet on Monday, January 25th.
Middle school.
Middle school met on the 19th. The update on the hybrid model is there's 315 students that are in school, 67 students are remote. The grade 8 live streaming, the teachers find that they have extra prep time and the curriculum is moving forward quicker and easier. Overall, it is a successful pilot. Live streaming grades 6 and 7 begins on the 29th of this month. Mr. Santry will hold a Zoom meeting for parents on the 26th, as he has said, and the students will receive a new schedule to follow. MCAS will be held this spring in a shortened version. There are attendance concerns over the last few weeks. The teachers will be taking attendance during each class period. And this will be discussed in the parent meeting and included in their reopening plan. Sophia Sprague has been selected as the 351 ambassador from the middle school. Congratulations to Sophia. And then our next meeting is the 23rd of February.
Thank you. And the high school?
The high school also met yesterday on the 19th. I was unable to attend because I was having technical difficulties, but they discussed Q2 and how that went. They had a live streaming update. They talked about MCAS testing, which has been postponed to the spring. And they talked about the dates for parent-teacher conferences in 2021, 2022.
Thank you. Capital planning. Capital planning has not met since our last meeting. They will be meeting next on February 2nd. Wellness advisory.
Wellness advisory is still working on setting a date for our first meeting, but it's in the works.
Paxel.
Paxel met on the 7th of January. All 4 principals presented the current status of special education in each building. Services are delivered in a push-in model where possible. The model for students coming in 4 days a week at the elementary, middle, and high schools, for the most part, is 2 days with their cohort and 2 days with special education staff. Ms. Hanscom stated that liaisons have reached out to all families regarding COVID compensatory services. There is much information on the district website under special services under COVID-19 if parents have questions, and they can always reach out for more information. And they will meet again the first week of March.
Excellent. Thank you. TC Passios Building Design Committee.
Yes, we met on the 13th, talking about more of the soft costs, the more specific details. I just want to give a shout out to John Londa, who's been a great resource, filling us in on all the specifics and just so knowledgeable of the TC Passios building. We talked about the sidewalks and parking, some other things. We talked about that we're going to plan to be ready for the Maytown meeting with some forums, hopefully starting in March to go over more specifics. We also talked about transaction windows and security, just really trying to fill in the architect on kind of the little details so they can get a good cost estimate. And we plan to meet on the 27th.
And Lifelong Learning Advisory has not met since our last meeting. Topics for future discussion. Committee members have any topics for future discussion? No? Not seeing any. All right, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Ms. Shapiro.
This is Sophie Shapiro, and I'll make a motion to adjourn at 9:19 p.m.
Is there a second? Ms. Archambault.
This is Carol Ashambo, and I second that.
Roll call.
Ms. Shapiro,
Yes.
Mrs. Kelly, Mr. Leighton,
Yes.
Mrs. Archambault,
Yes.
and Mrs. Bertrand.
Yes. Good night, everyone.
Aye.
Good night.
Good
Thank
night.